With that in mind, let's call on our next guest now, joining us to discuss terrorism awareness and personal security. Brian Morris, retired Master Sergeant of the Special Forces Green Beret, Skyping in this morning, quite appropriately, from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Brian, it's good to have you. We should also point out that you're the author of the Green Beret Pocket Guide, Terrorism Awareness and Personal Security. Brian, we'll get to your book in just a moment. First, we want to know what's at stake for Americans abroad now that that report has been released.
Well, first off, thank you for having me, JD. I appreciate it. And I would say, first off, that I understand that the country is polarized as far as Democrats and Republicans, but it's a sad day when Americans are put in harm's way for political reasons. The enemy, I can tell you from personal experience, does not care if we're a Democrat or a Republican. They look at us all as infidels. So the bottom line is, it's irresponsible. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so basically, you know, you're saying, do you disagree with the release of the report? Do you think it was just a political move?
I feel like it's irresponsible. It's a bad practice, first of all, to release techniques, tactics, and procedures for interrogation. That's all they are. They're just techniques and tactics that are utilized by individuals that are doing their job. These are patriots that were doing what they were supposed to do to get information. I think we lose sight and take things out of context. We lose sight of the reason that these interrogations were being done. This country has been attacked, the largest attack we've ever had on the nation, 9/11, and we had to get that information to save American lives. They could have easily done an internal investigation. If there was something done that shouldn't have been done, then they could have dealt with that privately. There was no need to ostracize these guys, to out these techniques in public. I don't see anything good that could have possibly came out of it.
And mindful of that, Brian, we've got about 2 minutes.
I don't speak for the military or the government at all. I'm speaking for myself.
Understood, and we do appreciate that. We want your candid assessment. 2 minutes remain in this segment. You've graciously consented to stay with us for another segment to talk more about your book. I'm interested in morale. We heard over the weekend that in the wake of the release of this report, morale within our intelligence community has hit rock bottom. As a military veteran, as a Special Forces veteran, are there problems now with our military's morale, not only in the wake of this report, but on this drawing down of forces in an effort to lighten our military budget by this Commander-in-Chief?
I would say that it's disheartening, but at the same time, you have to remember the CIA are an elite group of people, just like in the Special Forces, and we tend to do things for the people to our left and our right. I'm not saying that these aren't extremely patriotic people, because they are. What they do at the end of the day is for their country, but they're going to keep their morale up just based off the fact that their survival depends on their being there for the guy to their left and to their right.
Dr. James Mitchell, the CIA, basically in Torture Architect, says our enemy knows, and I use the word torture loosely because some people say it wasn't torture, says our enemy knows us better than we think they do. Do you agree with that?
30 seconds, Brian.
No, I don't agree with that. I think that, first of all, I don't agree with the word torture. I don't feel like what we did was torture. That's my personal opinion. I think that they were using techniques that these guys were completely recovered from. It was just techniques that were used to gain information.
Fair enough. Brian Morris, we're going to step aside for a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the practical advice you've put in a book, the Green Beret Pocket Guide, Terrorism Awareness and Personal Safety. There is more with Brian Morris as we continue on America's Forum. Let's continue our conversation with Brian Morris, retired Master Sergeant, Special Forces Green Beret, Skyping in from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Brian is the author of the book, Green Beret Pocket Guide, Terrorism Awareness and Personal Security. Brian, we sure do appreciate your time. In the 3.5 minutes we have now, I want to talk to you about people like Dr. Mitchell who feel their personal safety may be assaulted. Obviously, there have been attacks around the world. Why did you write this Green Beret Pocket Guide? Because of those possibilities?
Well, JD, I've traveled a lot over the last 25 years to actually about 28 years now. I retired in 2012, and I've continued to travel. And during my travels, I noticed that there were a lot of Americans overseas. You have people that are working on vacation, members of the press, people that work for the government. And one of the things that seemed to be common amongst all was that I saw a major lack of situational awareness, which is nothing more than staying alert, being aware of your surroundings, and understanding the threats that are present, and then gaining the knowledge to deal with those threats.
Right, Brian, you say we're actually open game to foreign countries and terrorists. How so? And I know that you have a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Homeland Security, so you're obviously an expert in this. What do we need to be doing when we're traveling abroad?
Okay, there are a lot of things that you need to do, but the first thing you need to do is understand the threat of crime, the threat of terrorism that exists overseas. In my book, I talk extensively about this topic. I then go into how to find a hotel, how to set up your trip, how to organize the trip before you leave. I talk about avoiding terrorist and criminal surveillance and ways that you can mitigate your risk of being surveilled and how to get out of surveillance if you are being followed. I talk also about skyjackings, surviving hostage situations. I have a whole chapter on that. I go in depth on how to survive a hostage situation. I also talk about other things that can happen to people when they're overseas, such as getting arrested or a peacetime governmental situation where you're arrested by the power of the country that you're in.
And in a minute and a half that remains, Brian, just as when we're told on an airliner to note where the doors are in case of emergency, is the most important thing when you're overseas to know the location of the American embassy or consulate in case you have any type of problem?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. It's a great question. And there's actually an entire chapter in my book that has nothing but consulate numbers and embassy numbers for every country in the world, not only for ourselves, but for countries that don't have American embassies. I've got the ABCs, or Australia, Britain, and Canada in there. So I cover every country. I've got the number that you can call, and that's definitely something that you want to take into consideration before you travel. You want to have that stuff punched into your telephone or on your person.
Brian, in the 20 seconds we have remaining, are there any countries that you would say Americans should avoid altogether, especially right now?
What I would suggest is that before you travel, you get on to the State Department website and you look for what they call travel advisories. Mm-hmm. Any country you're going to go to. I do that no matter where I'm going. I get onto the State Department website. I punch in the country. It's a drop-down menu. You can find any country in the world, and it'll tell you not only what countries not to go to, but if you're going to go to a country, it'll tell you what areas to avoid. And I talk about that in the book as well.
Fair enough. The book sounds like it's a must-have at Christmas time for travelers. If you're preparing to travel next year, really any time, it's the Green Beret Pocket Guide, Terrorism Awareness and Personal Security. Our special thanks to its author, retired Special Forces Sergeant Brian Morris. And we're coming right back.